In this week's Voices from the Past, we celebrate voices associated with the legend that is the Spitfire.
The Battle of Britain is about to begin.
We'll also hear from the chief designer of the Spitfire, R.J. Mitchell, and ace Spitfire pilots, Geoffrey Quill and Douglas Bader. The Spitfire was a groundbreaking plane that was both deadly and beautiful. You may have heard many stories about this legendary aircraft. There's the story of the Flying Aces and the Battle of Britain.
Now the Germans are dive bombing a convoy out into sea. There are 7 German dive bombers, Junkers 87. There's one going down on its target now.
And the story of the Spitfire versus the Messerschmitts. It's the story of a small plane made from aluminium, steel and wood that turned the tide of the Second World War.
This was their final hour.
One should learn not to be afraid of it. It was a wonderful feeling of we are one entity.
The Spitfire is now legendary. It first flew in 1936, but the history of the Spitfire began 13 years earlier. The Spitfire was born out of the long competition for the Schneider Seaplane Trophy, which was won outright by Britain in 1931. The builders of the winning plane were Supermarine in Woolston, Southampton, with a plane designed by R.J. Mitchell. The factory was a huge site, right on the banks of the River Itchen, across the water from Southampton city centre. It was a sprawling building with design offices, typing floors and construction floors. There were panel bending machines, the machine shop and the wing shop. The flying boat was powered by a Napier Lion engine of 150 horsepower. R.J. Mitchell was looking for a more powerful engine, so went to Henry Royce of Rolls-Royce, who promised an engine of not 150 but 1,800 horsepower. Within 11 months, the first 6 hand-built R engines were being assembled. New higher-octane fuels were being developed. No existing engines could compete with this. The Spitfire was the fighter that was to epitomise the spirit of a nation at war. It was first flown at Eastleigh, near Southampton, on the 6th of March 1936. By this time, the designer Reginald Mitchell was desperately ill with cancer. He was not to live to see his aircraft fight. But the maiden flights convinced him and his team that they had created a great aircraft. He was later to pay tribute to the RAF pilots who had carried out the test flights of his aircraft, as we hear in a rare recording of Mitchell speaking shortly before his death.
It has accumulated an enormous amount of information which is now being used to improve the breed of everyday aircraft. It is helping to develop our great airliners and ocean-going flying boats, and is thus bringing closer together the outlying parts of the British Empire. This indeed is an objective worthy of all our greatest efforts.
The team of pilots had gained vast experience that could be put to excellent use for future designs, but even they could not have foreseen how great the Spitfire was soon to prove to be.
They were a lovely aeroplane. They still look about the prettiest thing that's ever been built. I mean, jets included. And you see, that wonderful chap, Mitchell, who designed this aeroplane, I think it was awfully sad that he didn't live to see what it did for his country.
A year of design work went into adapting the structure of the prototype into regular production. The Spitfire was the first British all-metal stressed skin aircraft to be produced in quantity. Compared with the fabric-covered Hurricane, it wasn't easy to produce. It was made with aluminium, steel and wood. The alloy skin was flush riveted to reduce drag. The first contract was for 310 Spitfires at £4,500 each. The size of the contract was something of a problem for the Supermarine factory. They were more used to working on individual designs rather than bulk orders. Spitfire pilot Geoffrey Quill worked with R.J. Mitchell and knew exactly why the early RAF pilots deserved such credit.
These fellows knew more about high-speed aeronautics than any other design team in the world. When Mitchell turned his attention to producing a fighter, it is entirely logical that he produced something like a Spitfire. In fact, it would have been rather surprising if he hadn't.
By August 1940, the mass production work was frequently interrupted by air raid sirens. Everyone had to dash to the air raid shelters as the German planes continued their relentless machine gunning and bombing. In the shelters, the staff played games and sang songs to drown out the sound of the bombing. The factory was like a sitting duck, so the management had an idea. What if the Spitfires could be made somewhere safer, somewhere much more ordinary? Dennis Webb was the manager of the spare parts department.
After a search, it was decided that Hendy's garage in Pound Street Lane and Seward's garage in Winchester Road would be ideal.
Unassuming places like warehouses, garages, bus depots, and even the Sunlight Laundry in Southampton became production hubs. It wasn't a moment too soon. The search for alternative venues went from pressing to urgent.
The enemy is making preparations for the invasion of Britain. Invasion by land and sea, but principally by the air.
By now, the dispersal plan had gone far beyond the outskirts of Southampton to Chandler's Ford, Bishop's Waltham, Hursley Park near Romsey, and then to Castle Bromwich in the Midlands. It wasn't enough just to build Spitfires. The Spitfire designs had to get better. Each new mark had to get faster, fly higher, and turn better. The improvements came thick and fast. At the outbreak of war, the Mark I Spitfire had a top speed of 584 kilometres an hour, and by the end of the war, 724 kilometres. In the skies over Britain, the battle was being won, but at a terrible cost. 507 pilots were killed and 500 injured. Over the years, 22,000 Spitfires were built. Some went to sea as Seafires, naval fighters, some served as high-speed photo reconnaissance aircraft, and others as intelligence gatherers. The Spitfire stands for so much, grace and gallantry. She's a symbol of freedom. Let's end with a story from squadron leader Douglas Bader. A German pilot had been shot down by RAF Hurricane pilot Peter Townsend.
The German wasn't shot into the sea. He just managed to crash land on the aerodrome, and he got out. And Peter went up to him and said, nice to see you, glad you're right, son. And he said, I was shot down by a Spitfire. And Peter said, no, you weren't. You were shot down by a Hurricane, because that's my aeroplane. And in fact, there isn't a Spitfire within 200 miles of where you're standing at the moment. He said, 9-9, ich bin Spitfire. You see, so this was the wonderful phrase that Peter invented of Spitfire snobbery.
The legend of the Spitfire lives on.